People who have been saying that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have found their match in Dr. Sophie Chandauka, I can't say they're wrong. On Friday, the 10th of April this year, Sentebale announced on their official website that it has commenced legal proceedings in the High Court of England and Wales, seeking the court's intervention, protection, and restitution, following a coordinated adverse media campaign conducted since the 25th of March, 2025, that has caused operational disruption and reputational harm to the charity, its leadership, and its strategic partners. The defendants: Prince Harry and Mark Dyer, a former trustee, identified through evidence as the architects of that adverse media campaign, which has had significant viral impact and triggered an onslaught of cyberbullying directed at the charity and its leadership. Considering how litigious Prince Harry has been over the past half a decade, the saying karma is a comes to mind. Now, that's not to say that I'm confident this case will go anywhere. Mind you, I don't even have access to the filings. No one does, not even the mainstream media. All we can see is that an action has been commenced for defamation in particular. And if you're surprised about this, then I'll remind you that this has actually been in the making for well over a year at this point. Back in March of 2025, specifically the 26th of March, The Telegraph had quoted Sentebale as saying that a lot of information being shared is untrue and defamatory in nature, and that when they were ready as an organization, they would share more details about the events leading up to this point. So clearly, this lawsuit has been in the works for, as I said, over a year at this point. Another interesting fact that was refreshed in my mind when I read this article from The Telegraph is Dr. Chandauka's claim that she, at the time, was simply blowing the whistle about issues of poor governance, weak executive management, abuse of power, bullying, harassment, misogyny, etc., etc. Of course, this statement was made before the Charity Commission's findings later in the year that there were indeed issues surrounding poor governance, lack of clarity when it comes to policy and delegation, responsibilities, who should be doing what, and most notably, their failure to contain the situation by allowing it to blow up and go public, thereby risking the reputation of the charity, which is, of course, also a very relevant consideration when it comes to this entire case. Assuming that there have been some defamatory claims made, is this even a good idea? First of all, because I understand that there are new people here who haven't been watching me since the Johnny Depp days and every other defamation case I've covered, let's quickly go over the elements of defamation. What is required to be satisfied for a finding of defamation to be made in favor of the plaintiff? In the UK, an untrue statement that is published to a third party and identifies the plaintiff, thereby causing them serious harm, is deemed to be defamatory. Serious harm in particular is an incredibly important hurdle. As per Section 1 of the Defamation Act 2013, a statement is not defamatory unless its publication has caused or is likely to cause serious harm to the reputation of the claimant. As I've stated, I don't have access to the actual legal filings, and so I don't know what the claim exactly lays out as defamatory or slanderous, libelous statements made by Prince Harry and Mark Dyer. And so I'm limited in analyzing the merits of the case and the chances of success. So bear in mind that this will be a general discussion until we learn more. Based on last year's reporting on the matter, though, a significant portion of the attacks were leveled against Dr. Sophie Chandauka herself. So it will be interesting to see what statements she is going to rely on to prove that Sentebale's reputation is being hit or has been hit as a result of this alleged smear campaign. We know the Sussex Squad has been unleashed on Dr. Sophie Chandauka, but the question is, did these attacks actually cause any serious harm? That's really what it all boils down to. I've said this before, people can lie about you and say things that you may find hurtful, but if your reputation remains unscathed, or at least relatively unharmed, then it will be very difficult to get over that hurdle. So Sentebale is going to have to prove that, presumably through their financial records. I went to have a quick look at their finances. We don't know the health of the charity's finances as of 2025. By the way, the charity's performance keeps slipping downwards. Based on the fact that this lawsuit has been filed, I'm going to guess that they're claiming to have lost donors, thereby taking another hit to the charity's financial health. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is reflected in this year's filings showing last year's records. Speaking of finances, there are two incredibly important considerations that have to be taken into account before such lawsuits are pursued. Now, obviously, again, this lawsuit has already been pursued, so we're going to assume that these things have been considered. Whether I agree with this choice to go ahead depends on what it is they are claiming. Because on the face of it, as far as I'm aware, things have died down. The feud between Harry and Dr. Sophie Chandauka and the whole Sentebale issue is over a year old at this point, and I personally haven't seen it getting revived in the media. It did end up making it to Tom Bower's latest book, Betrayal, but apart from that, the story, as with many other stories, is old news at this point. And this is relevant to me when considering whether this is worth it. As pointed out in the guidance for trustees when it comes to charities and litigation, trustees have a duty to act in the best interests of their charity. A decision to take or defend legal action must be made exclusively in the best interests of the charity, having considered whether or not another course of action is available. In making their decision, the trustee should take and consider legal advice, consider and assess the economic prospects of success or failure and the impact on the charity, and consider whether their intended actions are proportionate in the circumstances. It also rightly points out that costs are going to be an issue here. Typically, it will cost the charity time and money and may have a negative impact on its reputation. Even if the charity wins, it may not recover all its legal costs. I will stop here and say that, as per The Guardian, the costs of pursuing this lawsuit are met entirely by external funding and no charitable funds have been used. This is on the back of saying the charity should not continue to use its resources to manage and address the damage this adverse media campaign has caused to its operations and partnerships. In order to secure that protection, the board and executive director have taken this legal action. So when it comes to costs, from the looks of it, the charity is going to be protected. Something which I suppose Prince Harry and his people either were not aware of or missed, because in their response to this, they stated that it is extraordinary that charitable funds are now being used to pursue legal action against the very people who built and supported the organization for nearly 2 decades, rather than being directed to the communities the charity was created to serve. It's also worth noting that they both categorically reject these offensive and damaging claims. All right, so at least when it comes to costs, it appears that the charity will be protected. However, the same cannot be said about its reputation. The problem with this is that the Charity Commission's finding last year had already found that making the fight public, and yes, you can blame Prince Harry for throwing the first punch. Dr. Sophie Chandauka merely responded. But whatever your opinion is, the Charity Commission found that both of you were in the wrong when you did that. Because what ends up happening, and what ended up happening, is the charity's reputation takes a hit. The battles that played out in public were clearly personal in nature. It was personal beef at that point, as the kids say these days. And as the commission found after its investigation, that personal beef, airing of dirty laundry, did not in any way serve the charity's best interests. The same can be said potentially for this legal action. Sentebale does acknowledge that this isn't the best outcome. In the statement released on their website, they said that they hope that those who believe in Sentebale's mission will understand why this legal action, whilst difficult, was necessary and important, and will continue to stand with us and focus on the work ahead, which is all well and good. But realistically, given the high profile nature of this case, of course, Prince Harry is a litigant, and so it's going to be splashed in the headlines for months unless it's resolved out of court. And even then, This simple announcement that they are planning to sue Prince Harry for defamation has already made quite a splash in the media. So people can argue that after a year of things quieting down, the only thing this lawsuit is going to result in is further damage to Sentebale's already damaged, according to Dr. Sophie Chandauka and the rest of the trustees, reputation of the charity. So is this really the best course of action to take? That's what I'm thinking right now. Again, without seeing the claims, the filings, without any information. I understand that Dr. Sophie Chandauka is also a lawyer, and she is one that is significantly older and therefore much more experienced than I am. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it can be difficult to see things clearly and objectively, especially when you're the one who's under personal attack, as she had been at least last year. I don't know if these attacks have continued, but we know that she was definitely attacked last year. Things can get really messy when personal feelings start to creep in. Things can get vindictive, things can get nasty, and people stop seeing straight. People stop thinking about the bigger picture. So as someone who is luckily removed from this case entirely and is also a lawyer, the way I see it is it's a balancing act. You've been attacked, you're hurt. Maybe you've lost a few donors. They're going to have to prove, by the way, that whatever these defamatory statements were led to this loss of donors. If donors simply pulled out because they only wanted to work with Prince Harry and they wanted that, that royal dust to sprinkle on them by proximity, then that's not defamation. That's just bad luck. But back to the balancing act, I would, if someone came to me for advice, urge them to consider the short to medium long-term impact on the charity's health. Is this case worth it? Is it going to improve the charity's reputation and financial situation? Or is it going to do nothing or worse, impact it adversely? Because that's the whole issue with the Charity Commission's findings last year. A battle of words was seen to be damaging to the charity's interests, let alone a lawsuit where you've got discovery and things that we as the public are not privy to coming out and potentially ruining the charity's reputation even further. At the end of the day, donors don't want drama, especially when they're donating big money, millions, as Sentebale is used to. They don't want to be associated with any of this negativity. Whether a party is in the right or in the wrong really doesn't matter to these people. In terms of the defenses that might be available to Prince Harry and Mark Dyer, this is all generalization at this point because I don't know what the exact libelous or slanderous statements are. If I did, I could go through each and every one of them, as I've done with all the other cases I've dissected on this channel, and tell you, oh, well, this one could be explained away as honest opinion. This one seems to be substantially true. Or this one, they've got it in the bag. That is defamatory. Can't do that here, unfortunately. But generally, they can argue that what they've said is substantially true. So the gist of it is true. It doesn't have to be word for word, verbatim true. And the onus will be on the defendant, being Prince Harry and Mark Dyer in this case, to prove that the statement is in fact true. So the default state of affairs is that it's false and therefore defamatory. They can argue that, hey, it's my honest opinion based on reasonable information arrived at reasonably. And since opinions are not statements of fact, they cannot be objectively true or false. They're subjective in nature. They cannot be defamatory. There are other defenses which I do not believe will apply in this case, and so we will not be talking about them any further, unless Prince Harry and Mark Dyer actually choose to rely on one of them, in which case we'll discuss them in a future video. But that's about all I can share with you right now, with zero documents to support this legal analysis, if you can even call it that at this point. This is more just an introduction to what could potentially be a long, drawn out, messy, and incredibly expensive battle. So stay tuned. I'll be sure to bring you any updates as they come along. I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be thinking, whatever ends up happening, Prince Harry deserves this. And you know, I said at the start, karma is a B. Karma is a B. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.